Welcome to I Know How You Feel, a podcast for common experiences not so commonly shared. This is a platform for growth, connection, and mindful conversation. Today on the podcast, we have Becca. Becca is a wife, mom of two feral children, teacher, and hater of all things winter. Let's connect with Becca. Hi, Becca. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I know it's a really interesting time in the world to be a teacher, and so we'll definitely get into that. But I just want to start out with the question about what drew you into teaching special needs children?
So I always joke that I have like a family history of teaching because on both sides of my family, there's just a bunch of teachers. I think it's easier to count the number of people who are not teachers. And so when I was really young, I tried to pretend that I did not want to be a teacher, but that only lasted until about middle school. And I realized that that's really what I wanted to do. There's some mission trips that I went on, and just all of the things that I did in my life kind of pointed to that direction. But it wasn't until high school, like I think my maybe junior or senior year, that my sister had worked at a camp for all people with special needs. And she kind of had put that idea out there of like, hey, have you thought of this? And at the time I had not. But then kind of serendipitously, there was a peer-to-peer program that started at my high school my senior year. And what that is that they take non-disabled peers and have them spend time in the special education, like self-contained classrooms for some amount of time. And typically it was just, social interactions. We would play games. We just kind of hang out. And it's a great evidence-based program that is fantastic for both special needs kids and kids without disabilities. And there were two girls in that class. It was an autism spectrum disorder class. That one of them just made me fall in love with it. She was just happy all the time. She loved seeing me. It was like she just always made you so happy to be in there. And then there was another girl that was definitely less happy. She was very I'm trying to think of how to say this. You can edit this part out. But so she
There's
was
no wrong way to say anything here. We're all just learning together.
Yes. But no, so this other student, she had very few people that she really liked, but I happened to be one of those people. And she didn't show that in the very traditional ways of like being happy when she saw you and, wanting to hang out with you. But it came out in ways of like, she would have days that she did not want to come into the school at all. And I would be the only person that could like convince her to come in. So I always say that the one student made me want to do it, and she made me realize that I could do it. So that was my senior year of high school. And I decided from that class too that I would really like to be in an autism spectrum class. And then, that was kind of it. And I have been on that track ever since.
Walk me through what your education was, because I know quite a few teachers, and it seems like they're already going to school for a very long time, but then to have to specialize in, special education. Walk me through what that looks like.
So I got my bachelor's degree in Michigan, went to Central Michigan University, fire up chips, but I got a dual endorsement. So I am certified in elementary education, K through 5, and then special education pre-K through 12. So you are absolutely right that it is a very long journey. From my understanding, I think they have cut the program down a little bit. But when I was in school, it was actually a 6-year program. So I had to take all of the classes to be an elementary education teacher. And then on top of that, also all of the classes to be a special education teacher. So I actually did take a couple of classes in high school. I was dual enrolled. So that saved me a little bit of time. And then just with some different things that like I got credits from like a Spanish class that I, took a class higher than what I needed to, that kind of stuff that kind of got me some extra credits there. So I was able to get out in 5.5 years. But the other thing too is that at least in Michigan, you have to do a full year of student teaching. So you have to do a full semester in a special education classroom and then a full semester in a gen ed classroom. So that definitely tacks on some time there too.
You also have a master's degree.
I do, yeah. So I actually was very fortunate to get into a grant program in my first, I think it was my third year of teaching. So I was able to do an all online master's program through Florida International University. That was 1 year, and I got my master's in special education in autism. So up until that point, I had been working in intellectual disabled class, which is what we call it in Florida. It's called different things, different places, cognitive impairment. But so that was what my bachelor's was teaching students with cognitive impairments. And then my master's was in autism, because those are two different certifications. And at the time in Michigan, I was not able to get my bachelor's in autism. So that was kind of the path that I knew I had to go. It just happened a little bit quicker than I thought it was since I got into that grant program.
I just want to take just a little time on the platform to acknowledge that teachers are going to school for 5 to 7 years, because many teachers do go back for their master's, and their programs are often a year. They're, 2 to 3 years. They're also still teaching. So I just wanted to ask, do you feel like you're compensated, or that teachers across the board, in your opinion, are compensated appropriately for that? Because I also obviously know of friends that have done PhD programs in different things, and they're surpassing teachers by a lot.
Yes. So I absolutely do not think that teachers are compensated for the schooling that they do and for the work they put in. I'm just in general there. The other thing that gets really tricky with teaching too is that for many districts in many states, this is teacher friends from all over the country have told me this. If your master's is not in an area that the district deems is applicable to what you're teaching, they won't even give you the pay for the master's. They won't give you the bonus for that. So obviously, because I'm teaching special education in an autism class and my master's is in that, I get that pay. But like, I have friends that have a master's in curriculum and instruction, which you would think would apply to any teacher in any classroom. They say, nope, that doesn't count. So you put in the money and the time to get that master's, and then you get no bonus compensation for it, which is just absurd to me. That's pretty standard across the board from what I've heard. So that's the thing too, is that that's not very widely publicized by districts, because that's not, something that would make them look real great. So a lot of people don't find that out until after they have gotten their master's, and they're expecting to, have a raise in pay, and then that doesn't happen.
Well, we're blowing the lid wide open on this. I have said that I feel like teachers should make the same as professional athletes. That's always been my personal view.
Yes.
Obviously, that's a frustration, but I'm also curious about, I know you're working in a public school system. Mm-hmm. Curious about what frustrations that has.
Just a few. So one of the big things, I teach in Florida, and it was incredibly shocking to me when I got down here and got into a special education class and found out that there is not a legal class size cap for a self-contained classroom. There are some ratio laws for gen ed classes that still are very fudgeable with the numbers, ratios within the grade level and stuff. So there's a lot of flexibility there for making very large class sizes legal. But for a self-contained special education classroom, there are no laws on how big that class can be or how many adults have to be in that classroom. And there is, of course, best practice of, we should have, obviously you'd think that they should be smaller than a gen ed classroom. They should have multiple adults in the class to help with behaviors and self-care needs and all of the things. But I technically could have a class of 30 students with disabilities by myself, and that would be completely legal, which is just wild.
That's right.
Yes. And obviously that's not happening frequently, but like at my school, we have several self-contained units, and I think my class is the smallest right now with 12. But I mean, we have had classes with 16, 17 kids before, and that is with multiple adults. But that's another frustration too, is that people love to say, oh, well, you have 3 adults in that classroom, or you have 4 adults, or you have however many. But between breaks and helping students with toileting and, going to resources and all the things, it's a very short amount of the day that you actually have all of your staff in the room. And as horrible as the pay is for teachers, for paraprofessionals and behavior techs and all of those things, I don't know how anyone keeps these jobs because the pay is so, so, so low for a very stressful job that is a ton of work. And I'm talking, you could easily make significantly more money working in fast food or, at a gas station or so many other options with far less stress. So, I mean, our jobs would not be possible as special education teachers without those people. And the people that are there really have to want to be there because they're not there for the pay.
How do you think that the system, I mean, besides what you just touched on, how do you
Mm-hmm.
think the system could, and I realize this is a big question, but
Right.
how do you think it could do better for the kids and the teachers?
Well, I mean, the first and most obvious thing is to pass legislation that would enact those class size limits, because I have had classes that are just as big as the gen ed classes, and that completely defeats the purpose of this type of classroom. I mean, the whole point is to have a smaller class size so that there's more individual attention on those students that need it. Because the other thing too is that almost all self-contained classes are multi-grade level. So right now I have second and third grade, but I've been in a K-5 class that you're expected to teach all of those curriculums to those students and differentiate and all the things. So having a smaller class size that you can actually focus more on those things is hugely important. The compensation of both the teachers and, yes, the support staff is absolutely the most important thing they could do, and that's going to create, more qualified people that would want to do that. And I think just the biggest thing is the lack of understanding from, administration and school districts and legislation, that they just don't understand what our classes are or what we need. And so I think a big thing would just be making sure that the people that are making these decisions have spent time in our classrooms, and not just, oh, we're going to pop in for 10 minutes, but really, taking time to spend time in our classes, see what we do on a daily basis, see what our needs are, ask us. Like, that's a big thing that happens a lot, is that these decisions are made for us without actually ever talking to the people that are the ones that are affected by those decisions. So I think that those would be my biggest things to just really make a change, which needs to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I can imagine it be so frustrating to just have decisions constantly made for you by people who don't have any experience inside your classroom. And yeah, that would just be so frustrating. I want to hit on a couple of hot topics in the school arena right now. The first one I want to chat about is COVID. And how it affected your school and your classroom, and what changes occurred because of it, and maybe what things are still left over because of it.
Right. So, on top of COVID, that was also the year that I was getting my master's online. I was also pregnant with my first child and still teaching that whole time. So, that was a very wild year. Yes. So, the biggest thing, obviously, was making that switch to, all online instruction at the drop of a hat, when most of us had no experience in that area, was, I mean, it was so stressful. And it was especially difficult for our self-contained classes that, our students are in our classes because they, at this time, are not able to function independently, right? They need a lot of assistance, they need a lot of help. And when our students were at home with other siblings that also needed to all of a sudden be online students, and their parents are now trying to work online or not working or sick or all of the things, it was really difficult to get our students, in particular in the self-contained classrooms, able to get onto the platforms and stay engaged on a screen and all of the things. That year, the rest of the 2020 school year, I had my baby in April. So this was like a month into the whole lockdown and everything. And so, I mean, there was kind of a blessing in disguise there, that I didn't actually have to take a maternity leave for him. And so I was able to just, I was not one of those teachers that was going above and beyond on everything. I was the teacher that was doing the bare minimum and also spending time with my baby. So that was great that I was able to have, 4 months of time with my newborn son that I didn't think I was going to have. And with my husband there too, that was another unexpected, bright spot of that he's also a teacher and was able to stay home with me. But that made it very stressful in additional ways too, then, that, again, being in Florida, we were one of the first states to lift a lot of those restrictions. We went back full time in person that very next school year. So a lot of schools continued to do like hybrid or stayed virtual for, a good chunk of that next year, but we went back right away. The students were given the opportunity to continue to be virtual. But then we had the issue of, then we are now trying to teach in person and virtually simultaneously. And again, still kind of trying to build the plane as you fly it, because all of us were still learning all of these new platforms and all of the new things on top of just the stress of now I'm in person. And the other thing with our students is that a lot of them are, they put things in their mouths and they spit and they do all the things that are not very conducive to not spreading a very contagious illness. So, and with a newborn at home, it was incredibly stressful. By second semester of that next year, all of our students had returned to in person. So again, it took that virtual piece, off the plate, but there's still a lot of additional stress of trying to keep them away from each other and not sharing materials and all of the things that just made it really difficult. I would say that we are mostly back to normal at this point. I mean, we still have like arrows on the floor and you still see the reminders of the social distancing and that kind of thing. I will say one of the benefits is that I think all of us are now a lot more comfortable with the virtual piece. We can do virtual meetings and, we have gotten a lot more used to just doing a lot more virtually than in person, which obviously has a lot of perks of just more flexibility and that kind of thing. A lot more of our parents have been able to be more involved in IEP meetings that in the past they might not have been able to be there for an in-person IEP meeting, but now they might be able to be on Teams or on a call. So there's definitely been some things left over like that have been beneficial. It was definitely a very crazy time to be a teacher, a very crazy time to be a new parent, and all of that together was just that year is a blur, basically. I don't remember much from it.
Do you feel like the kids lost a year?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
yeah, because I
I
was just thinking being virtual, that would be really difficult for any kid, or if their sibling needed to use the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like they just might have lost a year to COVID.
And in a lot of cases, I think it was a lot more than that because there were so many gaps in achievement already, not just with special education, but just across the board with socioeconomic status and English language learners and all of the things that those kids that already had a gap, it just got so much more severe. But at this point, something that I have kind of been really reflecting on in the last several years since then is that at a certain point, we can't say kids are behind when it's all of them. We have to adjust what we are expecting of them. And it was, a global experience, obviously, that it's not just one specific group of kids that was affected by this. It was obviously inevitable to have this loss. But at a certain point, I think that we need to look at the standards and what we are expecting of kids. And if everybody is low, then we need to adjust what we're expecting.
I think that's a really wise assessment and reflection to do, and to just dial it back so that
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of getting with on everybody's level. I
Yeah.
wanted to just circle back for a second. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
touched on maternity leave a little bit. And I know this is also kind of a hot topic across America. And you said with your firstborn, you had more time than you thought you were having.
Mm-hmm.
What are the expectations as a teacher for time off and working up until you give birth? What do you feel that the expectation is? And then what's the reality?
Yeah. So again, this will vary from state to state and district to district. My personal experience is that our district did not offer any paid leave outside of using up your sick time. With my district, your sick days roll over from year to year. And so you're able to, build up the number of sick days that you have. But then we are technically offered a maternity leave that is 6 weeks, but that is completely unpaid. You don't use your sick days, you don't do anything, you just get 6 weeks of, unpaid quote unquote time off. And then you're back. What they suggest that you do is do FMLA, which does give you up to 12 weeks. But again, you just have to go through your sick days first, and then anything after that is unpaid. And then the other piece of that is that once you are having unpaid time, you still have to pay your insurance premiums and any other plans that come out of your paycheck regularly. Even if you're not receiving that paycheck, you then have to pay, for those out of pocket without getting a paycheck. And then at a certain number of unpaid days, your contract has to be rewritten. And if you do take more time than what you have already been paid for, because you have to remember that as a teacher, you don't get paid for the summers, you only get paid for the time that you are working. So that time is split up throughout the year. So it's not I mean, it's salary pay. So if you have already been paid for more days than you are then contracted for, you have to pay the district back that money. So that is,
Oh, so 6 plus 12 is 18 weeks.
and
Like,
you can't combine those. That is you either do the 6 weeks or up to 12
oh,
weeks.
okay. So I have my personal feelings, but I'm keeping to
Uh-huh.
myself.
Uh-huh.
So are you expected to lesson plan? Like, are you
Yes.
expected to have that covered? Wow.
Yes. And again, that even varies from school to school. That's kind of an administration decision. Some schools will say have 2 weeks planned, but then as long as you have like an actual long-term sub set up, then they can take over from there. But it was the situation in my class required me to have that full-time planned. When you are on FMLA, you legally cannot be doing any work. Your work cannot be contacting you. You can't be, in communication with people that might be considered you trying to work, because if you're on FMLA, the legal understanding is that you cannot work during that time. And so if there's any issues with them finding that you're doing a whole bunch of work or still being in contact with things that you're not supposed to be, they can actually like deny you of that leave, or your school can get in trouble, your employer can get in trouble, whatever. So it's expected then that all of that is done before you leave, which obviously that's not always fully the case, and sometimes things happen, but it was a lot of mental work and stress to get all of that ready before you're out too, because especially in a class like mine, your planning is very kind of flexible and not set in stone with, okay, this day we're going to do this thing, because maybe that day everybody's really dysregulated and you can't get that done, or you get through something a lot faster. So there's just so much, you have to be so flexible with your planning that it makes it really, really difficult to plan that far ahead. And so you just kind of have to trust that whoever is your sub will be able to roll with those punches and get it done. But it's hard to not be thinking about that too while you're out, especially if you're going to be returning for the rest of the year, which was the case with my second kid.
It sounds like if you do choose to have children as a teacher, that
Mhm.
it still consumes so much of
Absolutely.
your brain power. The other hot topic I wanted to touch on, speaking of consuming brain power of
Hmm.
teachers, school shootings. I know that it's on TV, it's across the news, it's everywhere. How often is this in the forefront of your mind daily, and how has your school prepared you for it? Do you feel prepared? Is it something that you think about all the time?
Oh, I think about it every single day. That is not an exaggeration. Every single day, at some point, that thought crosses my mind. I mean, one of the things is at this point, the most recent school shooting in Georgia, they have talked about that strategic system that each of the teachers has like a badge with an alert button, and that is actually the same thing that we have at our school. So that was, in a strange way, comforting to hear that they are saying that was a helpful thing, and that it, prevented more tragedy. So that's something I have to wear every single day. That's on my person at all times when I'm at school. So that's, I mean, automatically a reminder right there. It is every day there's a situation where I'm thinking, if it were to happen right now, where would I take my kids? Would we run? Would we try to hide? My kids are incapable of staying quiet. They do a lot of vocal stimming and are very loud, and they will scream, and they're afraid of the dark, and all of the things that just, that's it's not a constant thought, but pretty close to constant, that it's always in the back of my mind of, is it going to happen right now?
And your husband is a teacher as well. What do those conversations look like between you guys when you talk about this?
I think that it has taken on new meaning since we've had our own kids too. They're not quite school age yet, but I mean, they're in daycare, and I mean, even my 1-year-old daughter, they do drills, and they do, they have a plan for what they would do if these literal infants are, in this situation. And I think it's kind of a mix of, we're very desensitized to it, and we try to not think of it. But obviously, when it's happening, we can't go more than a couple months without having a new story in the news. I honestly think it's to the point too now where all of us have a situation where it's a little too close to home. I mean, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas is about an hour and a half south of us. And from the very next day, every single school has had a resource officer on their campus full time. That was literally pretty close to home. And then I had friends that were teachers at Oxford. I have friends that were at MSU, either as students or working at the time of the MSU shooting. Like I feel like all of us now have at least, a couple degrees of separation from somebody that has been directly impacted. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of a mix of being desensitized, but also just, it does feel more like a when is it going to happen to us rather than an if. My husband and I did work at the same school for many years. And it was always that thought too, especially when I was pregnant, of do we try to get to each other? Do we try to stay where we are? Like, if something happens at our school, who's going to get our kids from daycare? And we are at separate schools now. So now it's, okay, if and when it happens at one of our schools, like, it's so difficult to think about, but it is always kind of just right there at the surface. Yeah.
I know that between COVID and the increase in school shootings and just not feeling as supported as you could, pay not being where it should, all these things, that's just a lot. It's very heavy for teachers right now. I think these topics are really important to talk about. And I'm just wondering, like, what keeps you going every day? What keeps you getting into the classroom every day?
Health insurance? I'm kidding. Because that's not great either. But anyway, as cliche as it sounds, it really is the relationships. And it's a very unique situation in these self-contained classrooms that I often will have kids for several years. And so, I make those connections, not just with the kid, but with their family. And, really just seeing enormous growth from when I get them when they're in kindergarten and have no idea, what it's like to be in school and they can't make a mark on a page, to writing their names and being able to read, and just seeing, I'm not seeing the typical growth that, a gen ed second or third grade teacher might see. I'm not seeing a year's worth of growth, but I'm seeing just enormous growth across the board with my kids. And just that's really what keeps me going. And, there have been opportunities to leave the classroom, or, the thought has been there to get out of education altogether, quite frankly. But it's thinking of, but then I'm going to miss, what the student does, or I'm going to miss, them getting out into general education, and just having that thought is what has kept me there.
I think you have a very special heart for this. And I think a lot of teachers are this way. I think they care a lot about their students. What advice would you have for teachers, especially those going into the special education space, just about how to navigate everything?
Um, Something that I think that I saw a little bit more when I was in school, I don't hear this as much now, because I think people have kind of realized, but I think there have previously been a lot of people that go into special ed thinking that it's going to be easy, and that, it's not as much academic rigor and all the things, but that is absolutely not the case. And actually with some of the laws in Florida now too, the laws that they have decided to make in Florida and not make in Florida in education just never cease to amaze me. But one of the things is that any student with a 68 IQ or higher, which if you have an IQ of 70 or below and have low adaptive skills, like self-care skills, that is a diagnosable intellectual disability or cognitive impairment. So we're saying that kids that could have a diagnosed cognitive impairment, if they have a 68 IQ or higher, have to be on gen ed standards. They don't have the option to be on a modified curriculum. And so what that has meant for our C classes especially is that I have kids that are both on the modified curriculum and the gen ed curriculum, and in multiple grades, like I was saying earlier. So, I'm being expected to teach multiple curriculums, that each one of those curriculums take up the full year bell to bell, right? So the logistics of trying to cram multiple curriculums into a classroom year, it literally doesn't work. So it's so much more mental work and physical, like, planning and all of the things that teaching is a hard job regardless. But being in this setting in a special ed self-contained classroom is astronomically harder in all ways. And so it's not an easy thing to do. You have to know that that's what you want to do. Making sure that you have the patience and the grace for not only your students, but yourself. And knowing that it's going to take a lot of advocating, not just for your students, but also for yourself. I've been in situations where, I don't have the staff to handle the aggressive behaviors that I've had with kids. And I've had to really advocate for that. Advocating that you're not spending all of your time at home working on IEPs and all of the things, like making sure that you are finding that balance. And that's something that I have been forced to do since I've had my own kids. I don't have the time to be working on lesson planning every night and working for hours and hours and hours on everything. Um, just finding a balance between work and home, which I know is that's what they all say about all jobs, but it's especially true with this, that it's not a job that you can do in your 40-hour work week. It's just not possible. There is going to be work that you have to do outside, but just making sure that you're not letting it consume you, and making sure that you're advocating with your administration, like, hey, like, I really need this planning time, or I really need, you know, if the Jenna teachers in your school get a day of planning that is covered by a sub, say, hey, I need that too. And making sure that our classes are forgotten about a lot. And so just reminding them, like, hey, like, our kids are students of this school too. We deserve the same resources, the same support, the same everything as everybody else. And just getting really confident with doing that advocating, and knowing that being that squeaky wheel sometimes gets you into, you know, not being the most liked teacher, but remembering that that's what your kids need and that's what you need. And even if it doesn't work out for you at that school, which is a situation that I have been in before, it's laying the groundwork to make it better for the future and making it better for the kids. So that's my biggest thing, is just make sure you're advocating.
I think that's really important. And I really like how you touched on finding that balance, because it is a theme that I hear from a lot of teachers, that
Mhm.
planning outside of school and it totally consumes them. It's a hard job. I know we covered a lot in a little bit of time. And so thank you so much for sharing everything. I know
Of
some of these
course.
were a little harder, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for giving me a platform.
Thanks for hanging out with us this week. If you'd like to connect with me or have an experience you'd like to share, shoot me an email at letstalkitoutproductions@gmail.com. If you liked our music, you can check out Quilter on Spotify. I Know How You Feel drops every other week. See you next time.